All right, Mr. Manager, are you set?
We're ready, I believe.
Yep.
All right, Commissioners, we're going to talk about two topics today. The first one was one based off of the commission meeting on the admin building. You asked us to come back and give you recommendations on the adult detention facility. We're prepared to do that based off a sequential plan of the projects and space needs study. Second is I had a meeting with Bob Layton yesterday. David and I did, along with Jim Weber and Alan King and Gary Jansen was there. And we talked about this North Junction ask that they would like us to partner with them on the North Junction. And we're going to talk about that second. And I think Gary's going to be on his way over here. But first, we'll talk about the courthouse. If by 3:15, I expect we'll be on the North Junction project. I am going to punch out. I have a dentist appointment I planned about 4 months ago that if I canceled it, I hope we'll be done with the ADF by then.
Commissioner Ranzau can help you with that.
If not, I will stay if we're not done discussing it. But I'd like to make that and just let David finish the conversation with the North Junction project. But without further ado, I'd let Tanya go ahead and kick off the courthouse discussion.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. As Mike said, this is a follow-up to Monday's discussion. So I thought for the first slide, I would just recap what you were told on Monday regarding the adult detention facility and county courthouse space CIP projects. We talked about two projects, the first being the adult detention facility and courthouse remodel. That's to repurpose and remodel an estimated 5,800 square feet at the adult detention vacant space on the first floor of the former inmate visitation area, and to remodel 5,895 square feet on the second floor of the county courthouse space, which would then be turned over to the district attorney's office. Total project cost for that, $1,874,630. The second project then being the adult detention facility expansion and courthouse remodel project. That is to build a two-story gross square footage of 7,100 square feet of an adult detention facility expansion for administration purposes. To remodel then 3,490 square feet on the third floor of the county courthouse, space to then be turned over to the district attorney's office. Total project cost for that, $3,482,464. The other piece I would like to recap is how this fits in line with the space needs for the district attorney and for the sheriff. The district attorney's office had an additional, through programming, had an additional square foot need of 15,135 square feet. With the second and third floor remodel being turned over to the district attorney's office, on the second floor of the county courthouse, there is a gain there of 5,895 square foot, or 39% of the square foot additional need. And on the third floor county courthouse, there's 3,490 square feet, or 23% of the square foot additional need. And then long term, for the space planning for the district attorney's office is to give them the entire second and third floor of the county courthouse for all of his operations. So long term, let me back up. Short term, he receives this additional space. Long term, then, the entire second and third floor would be utilized for the district attorney's office. The sheriff then, I broke out the square foot need and programming for the non-judicial operations, which is 10,636 square feet. And for the professional standards units programming, that was 1,315 square feet. So for a total there, need of 11,915 square feet. With the ADF project, and I'm going to clarify this a little bit, in total, that square footage, so that includes the first floor current vacant space, as well as the admin operations expansion. The total there, tenant space is 11,200 square feet. We had our on-call architect, Justin, reevaluate the space on the first floor, He came back with us saying that it looked like there was a little bit of a shortage there, but we are going to encroach a little bit more into the lobby space there that's not being utilized. And so we gain actually 100 square feet there. So in total, first floor, they would gain 5,900 square feet. The other piece there, the 5,300 square feet, and I need to speak to that, that is tenant space. And previously, when I was speaking to square footage, I was giving you gross square footage, which is the 7,100 square feet for the expansion. When you look at that expansion and the square feet tenant-wise, you get 5,300 square feet. So if you take the total square footage need then, the line up above, 11,915 square feet, subtract that from what we would gain with the expansion and then the first floor remodel, we are approximately about 751 square feet short if the sheriff were to bring over PSU. So there's a couple ways that can be addressed. Either during the design process of these two projects, we would ask the architect if there is a way to gain that 750 square feet by pulling out the building perhaps a little bit more, or the other alternative would be then that the sheriff would leave professional standards unit at Echo Plaza and continue that lease. So the other gain there is the centralized operations out of adult detention facility for the sheriff, bringing in his investigations, road patrol reserve unit, and professional standards unit. I believe Sheriff Easter is here. Mark Bennett. Okay. Excuse me. Let me introduce Mark Bennett, District Attorney, first. He is going to speak to the public safety efficiencies for the second and third floor county courthouse.
Thank you for pushing me up front. I've got to be in court here in another 20 minutes, so I've told you all for a couple of years now that we're running out of space downstairs in my office. So we need more space. We're landlocked there with a two-story building, so obviously we need something. Staying within the courthouse complex and within the courthouse itself, it makes the most sense. A couple of reasons why. We've got attorneys, got victims, and we've got evidence that we have to take to and from court every day. I just walked in with my files for this afternoon, and that's just legal files that you have to carry. To put us a block or two away would mean we'd have to bring evidence, guns and money and drugs and all sorts of things back and forth. It's an untenable position. We've got victims who have to come back and forth to court. There is some question sometimes as to their safety. If we had to go down across the street, around the corner, that kind of a thing. The manager came by my office a few weeks ago, and just in my office I had a cart full of evidence for a trial I've got coming up this summer. And so those are just nuts and bolts kind of issues we have to attend to. So keeping us within the complex is the ideal situation for the district attorney's office. That then we have kind of a limited scope to choose from then. If we are going to have administration leave the courthouse building, then we've got the option of keeping me literally within the four walls of the courthouse itself. The second and third floor are not right now currently equipped with courtrooms, so it makes the most sense. Every other floor of the courthouse has got a courtroom in it, or more than one. And so since the courts, trying to keep this a big picture here, what makes the most sense putting the puzzle pieces together? The courts need space, but for me to go occupy the 6th and 7th floors, for instance, would mean we have to, eliminate courtrooms, and that doesn't make any sense. So second and third floor, where Kelly's office, where Ms. Buckingham's offices are at, if they left, if the sheriff's investigation wing left, that would open up the entirety of the second floor. I understand we're doing this in waves, but if the understanding is that I will ultimately inherit the second floor in its entirety, then taking the investigation unit now, knowing that I'll as time allows and as your plan progresses, ultimately inherit the balance of the second floor, and ultimately the third floor makes the most sense. It keeps our functionality in one roof. There is interaction, obviously, between attorneys and support staff, between attorneys and what we call our coordinators, who interact with the public, who interact with law enforcement officers who come to court to testify. We'd all be in close proximity. It just makes a lot of sense to have us that close. I will say I've been to Johnson County, where their district attorney's office is in that same basic framework under their current system. Now, you probably know they're going to raise their entire courthouse, move it across the street, as I understand it. But currently, their DA's office is on, I believe, 3rd and 4th floor, 4th and 5th, whatever it is. But they're on 2 floors. Stairwell connects the 2. They can take elevators up between the 2, and it works very well. I've walked through their system and understand how that works, and I believe we could replicate that here and increase our efficiencies. The bottom line is we have 2 floors right now, so they're one on top of the other in the annex, and it works quite well. So in terms of how to most efficiently run the district attorney's office, have a footprint that is capable of expanding over time, because as it stands right now, you all know I'm out of space. And for this office to maintain its obligation to the public and safety of this community, or excuse me, public safety of this community, we're going to need some space to expand. We've seen the projections from the architect, and we believe that this would fit our needs. I would also say, in terms of increasing efficiencies, just from a fiscal point of view, to move us, I mean, I'm not sure what another option would be, but as over time, as, say, Mr. Arnold's office leaves next, he goes to wherever you ultimately decide he's going to go, we could refurbish, and it wouldn't, the retrofit for my office wouldn't be significant. It's an office to an office. I mean, I'll need to change a few interior walls, but we're not talking major construction here. Have that cleaned out, and then I move my staff there, as opposed to moving my entire operation to some off-site location, you know, coming back and retrofitting the annex, for instance, or knocking it down to build me a new office there, a 3-story office. There'd be a lot of inefficiencies in that kind of a process, because moving my entire operation somewhere for a temporary and then moving us all back again, candidly, I don't know how to accommodate that. I mean, there's other things that I think you all intuitively understand about a district attorney's office, the safety considerations, not just in terms of my personnel and staff, but more to the point, we have a lot of information. We deal with a lot of information that is of a very private nature. We've got sexual assault victims. We've got financial crimes victims. We've got piles of information regarding suspects, personal information. And we have obligations not only under Kansas law, but even very specific under federal law with respect to the FBI's NCIC system. We have to maintain locks on doors, and literally, if you come to my office, we have to sign you in or out. All of these things have to be done, and so keeping us within the structure of the courthouse in close proximity to one another, it just strikes me as the most efficient use of taxpayer funds to maintain this office. So, big picture, that's my pitch. What I've told the system managers, is I understand this is a process, and you're going to potentially, I understand the discussion today was to step 1 would be to give the sheriff what he needs so that he can vacate that second floor. I then, within that same process, step 2 or part 2 of step 1 would be, or phase 1 would be me then moving into the old investigation unit. Ideally, I'd love to take over the whole second floor en masse at once, but I recognize that we're trying to be good stewards of the public funds and do this one step at a time. So I'm more than happy to take that over, with the one caveat that it does not make sense for me to take that over if I'm not going to inherit the balance of the second floor. But if that's the plan, over time, I'm willing to. I'm a team player here. I'll work with you, and as that goes one step at a time, we'll be there to make this as smooth a transition as possible, whether it takes 1 year or 2 or 3 or whatever it may be. Okay? Any questions?
Very good. Any questions? Commissioner Howell.
Thank you. Thanks for taking time to come up and talk with us today. So I'm just thinking, the math is basically we would if we did all the things that just been described, we would give you about 62% of the need that you have, and that would happen relatively quickly. I mean, I'm going to guess probably about a year or so. I don't know the timeline of this. I'll just say about a year roughly. 62%. So the balance of 38%, which is 5,750 square feet left. If you got that to you in a couple of years, or however long it took to get to that next step, is that something you can support that idea?
Yes, sir. I mean, okay, yes, there's, I need space. Right at the moment, I need space, but I've been telling you this for several years, and to your credit, you've been accommodating. You've given us the GIS space. That's going to help a little bit. We get the investigation section. That's a big relief to us. I'm not going to stomp my foot here and demand the whole thing. That's not realistic. So absolutely, I'll work with you on this, and that would be a huge benefit to us in this staggered approach. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm excited to think we have a relatively good plan, I think, to provide 62% solution to you in a year roughly, let's just say. So if this is the right answer, and it sounds like it's probably the best plan out there. It doesn't give you everything you asked for, but enough of that you can wiggle by until we get the rest 38, which would happen at some point.
As long as we're looking at this sort of holistically in terms of this is where we're headed and we know where we're headed, that's great. If 2 years from now we change pictures, then I'll have to come back and adjust. But I don't hear that being discussed at all. So
good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions? Sorry. Commissioner O'Donnell.
I just wanted to thank you for your patience with this, Mr. Bennett. There's not a week or almost a day that goes by that we're not talking about you and your needs, and that's really that's the whole reason. I know when Commissioner Dennis brought this up at the meeting last Wednesday, I jumped on it because really you're the issue that needs most addressed. Like on our priority list of top 5, you're like the first four slots. So
I'm not sure that's good or bad to be the top 4 slots. But
no, it's making us move quicker than we would have, even probably quicker than the manager wanted us to, because it's much more important than figuring out where we're going to end up. So that's been our whole goal. But you've been a great partner because you could have been a lot more tough on us.
These are not easy solutions. We're talking a lot of money and major changes and a facelift that hasn't occurred in 60 years in this place. Yeah. So I would add too, though, that I don't see Judge Fleetwood here yet. I'm sure he'll hear from him. There's another component to this, and that is the courthouse itself, the courts. And I know at one point they were actually sort of the primary concern. They've sort of taken a back seat because, frankly, I'm not sure when the funding's going to come for the things they need. But the upside is this plan puts you in a better position to when it does come time to pivot to the courts to accommodate their needs, down the road as well.
Yeah. So. Well, all the electeds have been so great for us to deal with, and everybody's been willing to work. And I mean, even Linda Kazire this week was looking at ways that she could move out of the courthouse sooner to accommodate what you and others need. So everybody's just been awesome. So anyway, I just wanted to publicly say that.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Well, Mark, thank you very much for the information. And when Commissioner O'Donnell says we talk about you every day, it's all good. Trust me.
Well, hey, somebody has to. You and my mom, you can. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, I'd like to now invite Sheriff Easter up to speak to his public safety efficiencies with these 2 projects.
Afternoon, Sheriff.
Good afternoon. Appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come up here and speak today. I want to kind of go back a little bit in time. About 5 years ago, when this was first brought up, it was having to do with the court system itself and the space that they needed. And so we took a look at the vacant space that we have, and which used to be our visitation area over at the jail on the first floor, to see if that could accommodate investigations. So we had a floor plan made for that, and then over about 2 years after that is when Mr. Bennett got hit with a whole bunch of stuff that he didn't they didn't see coming in the future, with discovery videos, all that other stuff, which now you know where he's at space-wise. And so we took a look at trying to do some type of an addition up front. and then on top to be able to accommodate third floor operations for the sheriff's office, which is our administrative section, and then also our PSU, or professional standards unit, which is across the street in a rental that we rent right now. So that's kind of the history of where we come from. So it kind of started with the court system. Now it's the priority is the DA's office. One of the things that I have said probably to each one of you, and of course to the manager and assistant manager, is we just want to be team players. So if there's whatever it is that you're wanting to do, we'll accommodate within reason. And the reason I say that is that we're a little bit cramped for space up in the investigation section, but we make do. What you can see here with the original plan on moving investigations over there, it's a little bit less square footage than what we have right now. However, the PSU area that was designed was a little bit too big, so we think we can, through an actual design, not just putting stuff in there to see if it would fit, I think we could make that do, along with the addition to the second floor for administration. What that does for us is, to be honest, right now when somebody wants to come visit the sheriff's office, it's not a one-stop shop. So if you want investigations, you got to go to the second floor. If you need something to do with warrants, judicial, whatever that is, it's the 8th floor. If you need something to do with patrol, traffic, our special projects unit, those type of things, that's the 3rd floor. If you want to come see me or any of the other colonels, that's over at the jail. If you want to come to the jail, then that's over at the jail. And PSU's across the street. So we're kind of fragmented. We've made it work all these years, but since we're having this discussion, I think the consolidated campus for the sheriff's office is a lot better fit. First off, for better customer service. Second off, it gives citizens the opportunity just to come in, have a secretary there, and say, what is it you need, and we direct them to the right place in one building. The other thing is, with the changes in the carry concealed stuff and carry unconcealed, being that people can walk into the jail with a gun, the detention deputies are not armed, they're not behind bulletproof glass, and they're susceptible to someone either trying to take over the first floor of our jail or simply harming a deputy. So since that's occurred, 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, we pay a deputy overtime to set up front that's armed. So it would take away that cost as well. I think it's a better fit for better customer service that we can provide to the citizens, and also a better command and control type situation. With law enforcement, you're always going to have substations out in the field because that's where they belong. So that's a better fit for patrol. However, everything else that we do here, again, is fragmented, and I think this would be a better fit for both the citizens, ourselves, and ultimately it creates room for the expansions that obviously you have to figure out how to do. So, but again, for us, doesn't matter if we're first, second, or third. It's whatever it is that you guys decide is the best efficient way to do this. From what I'm hearing, it's kind of moving us out first to create that space. But we will accommodate whatever it is that you guys decide to do.
Okay. Thanks, Sheriff. Any questions? Commissioner Howell.
Yeah, how much square footage did the PSU need again?
About 1,300, I think. Yeah, 1,300 square feet.
So if they don't move, then you got, with this plan, there's plenty of space, and there's a chance, I think I heard someone say there's a chance that with some design work, they might minimize this shortage per se. Is that what I heard?
There's plenty of space if you do the addition. If we just go over to what are, yeah.
I don't think that's one of the options. Maybe it is, but
okay.
Is there an option that we would build the addition at the same time we're remodeling the visitation area? I mean, does the visitation area have to happen first, and then the construction of the? It can be done at the same time. They're independent projects that can be done simultaneously or whatever, right? Okay.
My concern is that I'd rather do it once too instead of twice, because both areas would touch where citizens come in at, and so, if we had to do it twice, I guess that's what we have to do, but it would be better to do it once. I think so, just for operation purposes.
So for the admin side of the sheriff's office, do you feel like this is
yes,
a pretty long-term solution?
Yes, absolutely is.
So whether we solve the 751 on the front end or not, we're not going to worry about that right now, potentially. We're just going to talk about everything else, try to solve it in the plan if possible, but if not, worst case is they stay where they're at, and we just don't have to make that change.
It's $13,000 a year, $13,300 to pay for that space where PSU is at. Now, since we're talking about this, the ultimate thing, would it be great to have PSU over here with us? Yes. Can we do it without them and they stay there? Yeah, that can be done.
Okay. All right. That's all my questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I truly believe that we ought to do everything all at once rather than go through 2 different construction cycles. That makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me is 500 or 751 square foot shortage. If we're building a new building, adding on to it, why isn't it being built big enough to meet that? I guess I've missed something.
Commissioner, that is the way that the plans were when we originally talked about it 4 or 5 years ago. When we sit down and do the design for this project, if it's 1 project or 2 projects, we would talk about that shortage and see where that shortage can be gained if the sheriff decides to bring over PSU. And so, whether it's taking out the building a little bit further than we originally decided, that can all be done. So that shortage can be easily made up.
Okay. Well, the only thing that makes sense to me is do the whole thing, get the sheriff moved where he needs to go, get the space solved for the DA, and that takes a lot of the pressure off of us so that we can make a wise decision on what to do with an admin building.
And I might just speak to that from a project management and construction standpoint. When you can do this all as one project, there's economies of scales. We have 1 architect, we have 1 general contractor, we have 1 disruption to the operations, we have 1 staging area, we have 1 area, that materials would be used, 1 area that they're going in and out. So there is some time, and I do believe some money savings if we were to do this all as 1 project.
Good. Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Chairman. So just to make sure I understand, we talked about a year solution potentially for the district attorney, but this all kind of has to happen before the sheriff can move over to the new space, which the shuffle, so the DA space can't get remodeled until the sheriff's out of the way. So is this total thing about a 1-year thing for both the construction, the remodeling at the jail, and the remodeling at the courthouse?
And let me speak to that. So the project, if we do these 2 projects together, 12 to 16 months. And so we would start out first doing the remodel and expansion over at the adult detention facility. We would then move 2nd and 3rd floor sheriff operations over, and then immediately start construction on 2nd and 3rd floor for the DA, then allowing the DA to move in.
That would be a much shorter project because it's not new construction. It's just
Correct.
remodeling.
That's correct.
Office space.
You're right.
So.
Yes.
Yeah, we have a better chart on the next slide to show it in terms of the poem that we developed.
Well, I may have misspoke earlier. I said around a year or so. It's probably going to be more like 18 months or so before the DA would have his new space.
I think that's, I think when we looked at it, we were estimating around 12 to 16 months. So I would say somewhere in that time frame we could get the DA moved over.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't you go to the next slide, because I think that's probably what Commissioner Howell was talking about.
Okay. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to invite Ellen House up to speak to the district court needs and those efficiencies.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Judge Fleetwood sends his regrets for not being able to be here, but as you know, sometimes you get him, sometimes you get me, and today it's me. So, the first thing we'd like to talk about from the court side is the Consolidated Traffic Court. About 10% of the traffic that comes through the front doors of the courthouse end up in traffic court. And so to take that large group of people and keep them on the first floor to save the wear and tear on the elevators, the traveling around the courthouse, would be very desirable for not only the court, but also I've worked closely with Daryl Haynes in the Courthouse Police Department, and he completely agrees that, you know, the more people that we can get in and out, the better. We would also put, right now, the traffic court is on the 5th floor and the traffic clerk's office is on the 7th floor. And so when you go to court on the 5th floor, you either have to go up to 7 to file your papers or pay your fine or come down to 1. And there's a lot of running back and forth between 1, 5, and 7 just to come to traffic court. And so, again, by putting everything there on the 1st floor, it would be not only better for the building, but better for the public and better for our courthouse police. The second area is the improved domestic court area, family law. Right now we have 5 family law judges. 4 of them are located on the 4th floor. 1 of them is located on the 5th floor. The reason the 5th judge is not on the 4th floor is because we have a statutory obligation to house a Court of Appeals judge somewhere, and that happens to be where he is. And so if we could find suitable space for him elsewhere in the courthouse and move our 5th family law judge down to the 4th floor, that would again be beneficial for the efficiency of everyone. Not only the judges, the attorneys, the people that come to family law court. It would just make everything easier to have everybody all together. The way those 3 of the courtrooms are built there right now speaks to our old process of a centralized calendaring system, in that we have one very large courtroom that was used for mass dockets. We have a kind of a normal sized courtroom, and then we have a very tiny courtroom. And so we would also request that the 3 of those be remodeled and divvied up so that they're 3 equally sized courtrooms. That would just work better for the court processes in general. The issue of additional courtrooms to alleviate stress, as you know, and we've talked about for several years, we are always asking for additional judges and or magistrates. That is an issue that we can't control, you can't control. It's up to the legislature. But every year we ask, and we feel like honestly some year it's going to happen. And so we're asking you to plan for that, because if it happens in July and becomes reality in January, I don't think we can build 2 courtrooms in 6 months. So even if we build them before we get the judicial positions, there is certainly use for those courtrooms in the meantime. We constantly have visiting judges that come in to cover conflict cases in this district, as well as last July, the law changed that made protection from stalking cases to where the violation of a PFS order can now be a felony. And so what that has resulted in is a lot more requests for actual court hearings in PFS cases. And so we find ourselves bringing in more and more pro tem judges to hear those. And those would allow, if we had those additional courtrooms, that would allow us space to hear those in a proper setting. We would appreciate your support for these requests, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
How much space do you need for the traffic court?
I don't know that I have a square footage.
We're trying to have to get back to you on that. We have that information. And just so you know, we are looking at the 1st floor, the area where the treasurer's office, county treasurer's office is on the 1st floor, to rehab that or remodel that area for traffic court, which would benefit district court and district attorney's office. Their idea there is several citizens come to the courthouse throughout the day, going on various floors for traffic court issues. If we meet them on the 1st floor, then that's already better customer service that they're providing to these citizens that come in for traffic court. But I can get you that square footage.
One thing also, commissioners, that I asked Tanya to do immediately is to get with Justin and Graham and start arraying what the courthouse would look, minus the admin functions, and designing, working through the judge, Ellen, and the DA's office, what this courthouse would look like minus the admin. So what would be their most efficient, best design? And let's put that on paper and use that in our timeline as a plan to help in our renovation planning and CIP planning. Is that we need to do that. And so they're going to start working on that immediately.
Good. Okay. Any questions for the courts?
I do.
Commissioner Howell?
So just, it seems like this is probably the most difficult thing to pin down exactly. How much more courtroom space do we need to satisfy the long-term needs of the courts? I don't think I really understand that very well. So you're talking about maybe changing some size of some courts, maybe some larger courts, some smaller courts. I think you just mentioned that a minute ago.
Yes.
But how many more courtrooms do we need that's not just reconfiguring those types of things?
I think a near immediate need is 2, and looking out 10 years, probably 4.
Okay. And do you have target years when those will be needed?
Well, we will ask for 2 magistrate positions in the 2019 legislative session, and should those be granted, they could begin as early as 2020.
Okay. But those magistrate courtrooms would be the smaller courtrooms?
They would be smaller,
So
yes.
that's not like a new space, that's just reconfigured space, you think?
No, that would be new space.
It is new space?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other courtrooms would be needed about, what, said about 10 years, sometime down the road, quite a ways?
2024, 2025.
And then what other kind of spaces do you need to supplement those courtrooms? I mean, you have some offices and stuff like
Yes. Each district judge comes with staff of a court reporter and an administrative assistant. The magistrates don't actually come with staff, but we would have to reassign probably some clerks to act in the administrative assistant capacity. And so each of those would need to be at least 2 office suites. And then the Court of Appeals judge that we need to relocate within the courthouse requires a minimum of a 2-office suite.
Okay. Well, I'm sure the data is out there somewhere, but I guess I'd like to have Tanya or whoever maybe just pin down the square footage type of answer to the question. So I just want to have a better understanding exactly how many square feet we need and what year we need those spaces. That would help me a little bit down in my thinking.
The difficulty with the dates is we're dependent upon the Kansas legislature.
Sure. I don't know if this is I don't think this is something you guys would probably want to support, but I've heard there's been discussion of like taking away one district court judge, replace them with a couple, 2 or 3, whatever magistrates. In other words, you might lose a district court judge and have 2 or 3 magistrates that replace them. So there's more people involved.
Right.
So money wise to the state, it kind of works out a little bit easier for them to do it that way. So
Right.
I don't know if that plays into our decision here or not. I don't know, but anyway, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Commissioner, on this next slide, before Tanya kind of goes through it, I asked Tanya to produce this poem slide basically as a timeline, but to help you understand the bigger picture and in your mind as you look at the CIP and we tie it to whether it's a 5 to 10 year forecast, it's a better way to kind of look at the sequential nature of how all this needs to happen. I didn't think the quad chart quite showed it as well as this potentially could show it for you. And I have on here some suggested and some no later than kind of timelines, based off of what you heard from the sheriff, from Mark Bennett, and even from Ellen here on what potentially could happen. To me, this is kind of the best representation of trying to put in front of you a plan if we were to make it happen, understanding the totality of everything that we would have to do. And even on there you see, because Commissioner Unruh asked about the old courthouse, and that's not an immediate need or priority, but it is a resource requirement that we had to put on there in the outlier years, because you don't want to do all these projects in the same year, obviously. You want to try to spread the peanut butter and resource it appropriately. So this is the best representation of how, I could kind of show you what that would look like.
Okay, so as the manager stated, this is the sequential plan for the long-term Sedgwick County space needs. And so I'll go through each timeline here. So fall of 2018, if a decision is made on the sheriff's projects, we would start schematic design of the entire second and third floor of the courthouse for district attorney space. We would then begin design and construction of the adult detention facility remodel and expansion, as well as the second and third floor courthouse space that we mentioned would be space for the district attorney's office. Spring of 2019 then, as the manager said, this would begin the block or schematic design of the county courthouse. And Commissioner Howell, I know you just spoke to understanding the square footage need on the courtrooms. I can certainly give you that in numbers. This would actually lay out how that looks on a floor plan for each of the floors. Ellen mentioned that she will, Judge Fleetwood would be going to the legislature beginning January of 2019 to ask for 2 judges potentially, and so that is in the timeline there. And as the manager stated, he is hopeful that County Commissioners, you can make a decision on the admin building May of 2019. If that decision is made, then we can start the design and construction of the admin building. Then in winter of 2019, we would see the completion of the adult detention facility remodel and expansion, as well as the second and third floor of the county courthouse. At that point, Lindsay would do the bond issuance for those projects. We would then look at demoing the annex and begin the temporary moves that we spoke to on previous presentations of the Register of Deeds, County Clerk, and Finance and Budget if that's necessary. Then at the end of 2021, we would see that administration building complete. Beginning then in 2022, we would start the design and construction of the courthouse. And so we would do that in 3 years, 2022, 2023, and 2024, with the entire county courthouse then being completed by the end of 2024. And then on those years beyond, we would look at what the future of historic courthouse and Munger would look like.
Any questions?
And so with that, Commissioners, last slide. Obviously, it's our desire proceed with the recommendation of doing both phases of the adult detention facility. You see the number down there. That's $5.4 million, depending on what those design adjustments would be. I think we went ahead and put 5.5 in there in the CIP. And then the second point is, again, we need to somehow resource based off of this sequential plan of fulfilling resource and space requirements, and that's what we intend to try to do and present you with those recommendations as needed. Next step for us is, after this, is the admin building, then courthouse renovations, and all this as a puzzle piece that in the end will set us up for success for the future.
Okay, well.
And then I was going to, Lindsay's going to say a few words.
All right. Go ahead, Lindsay.
You all have a handout at your seats. It looks like this. On Monday, we provided you something that looks like this. It is the funding plan. This is updated and revised based on this manager's recommendation today. And so just to highlight some of the few key changes, in row 12, you'll see that used to be only the adult detention facility first floor remodel. That now includes the expansion there at that facility, as well as the extra $140,000 to accommodate that additional professional standard unit space that we think we would need. The admin building in row 14 reflects the cost of the recommendation, which would be to build onto this campus that 5-floor expansion, and so that is the number that's been programmed into this recommendation. And then finally, you'll see row 15, the district court expansion and renovation. The total numbers are still equal, but we have shifted around the dollars in the years in which they'll be done to represent what Tanya talked about before, that we would do that 4th floor courthouse space here first, and then do the rest of the building in the latter years. So the back of the sheet shows you the impact to the forecast of these decisions. So the cash funded section there at the top has not changed from what you saw on Monday, but that middle section, the forecast impact for bonded interest payments subtotal, has gone up about a bit, about $300,000 per year in the outer years after we do that bond issuance for the administrative building. And then you can see overall that impacts the bottom table for those two combined tables, cash funding and bond and interest. And so depending on feedback from you, this would be what we would include in the county manager's recommended budget, unless we do get some direction that you'd like to do something different.
Okay. Questions for Lindsay? Commissioner Unruh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This all assumes the decision's been made that we're going to expand on this site.
Since that's what was in the manager's recommendation today, yes, that's the version that we've prepared for this.
And so this is just consideration now, and then soon that decision's going to have to be definitively made.
Well, Commissioner, that's kind of in terms of the two decisions we had, that is the worst or the most expensive piece. So having this in there, if you choose something less than that, then we take it out of that budget. But that at least is forecasting for the most expensive option.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Then when does that decision have to be made? That was implied in here.
I think Tanya had said May 2019 was when we would want that decision, so we could get it incorporated into the 2020 budget.
Okay.
That's kind of, for us, that was kind of the last window. That's the 2020 budget. But in terms of if we had to do courtroom renovations or things here to support 2 new judges, then we honestly need a decision. That's kind of like the no later than time.
Okay. Well, I mean, I didn't know if we needed to come to a decision earlier than that in order to let the people who are wondering know what we're doing, or whether we just go our merry way, and if they make another decision, then that's made for us, I guess, or whether we want to, it doesn't make any difference to me, but I just didn't know if we want to say we're going here, and that way the people at Riverview, if they're waiting, they'll know, and the 150 building will know, or we can leave it. I mean, I understand the way that you've managed your finances, so I'm not saying, I'm just asking.
Well, Commissioner, honestly, I would like, as a county manager, for you to make the decision, and then we can resource it and put it in our forecast and prepare for it. So if you're asking for me, or based off of the finance and the budget, for budget reasons, I would like a decision made, but we've allocated up until May 20th is really a no later than time based off of the requirements we know are coming our way.
Well, I appreciate that, and we do have that leeway. To me, it just makes sense that if we have, unless we need to wait till the new commission's seated, maybe that's the thought. Maybe make that. I mean, my mind's made up. I'm ready to go, but whatever.
Okay, but the information is in here now. This is the worst case scenario, no matter what. So, no matter what decision's made, it's not going to cost any more than what's in here.
Of those two options, correct.
Yeah. Very good. Any other questions? Commissioner Ranzau.
Well, so last fall, I think numerous times, I made the statement that I think this remodel is what we need to do. I'm talking about the first floor ADF, this $5 million thing.
Richard, I thought you were talking about the new build.
No, sorry. Sorry to get your hopes up there. For a variety of reasons. Well, we could have been already down the road if you'd listened to me to begin with. But another thing I would suggest is that we do a review of the current utilization by the courts and the existing space. I'm not convinced that the current space is being utilized as efficiently as possible. Now, I suspect that the courts may not want us to do that, but I'm just telling you that you might consider that.
I think that's part of the plan, isn't it, to lay out exactly where.
No, I'm not talking about layout with moving people out, but I'm talking about the layout of the existing space. If we didn't move anybody out, could they more efficiently use the existing space? I believe the answer is yes. You could say I'm crazy,
Okay.
but I told you last fall that you needed to do this, and you told me I was crazy then too. So anyway.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if it's an appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion. Can we do that?
I don't think we can do a motion today.
Okay.
We'll put together the CIP amendment.
All right.
to you.
Perfect. Well, thank you.
But I think we've got.
for putting this together. This is exactly what I was expecting.
Based off the 2019.
Right, and we'll have meetings.
I think we've got consensus on what to do with the sheriff and with the DA immediately.
Okay.
Okay. Beyond that, I don't know that we've got consensus yet.
You'll approve that addition in the 2019 CIP, so,
Good.
for the budget. So.
All right. Any other questions about this part of it? You have anything else,
I have one
Tanya?
question here.
Sorry.
So, other things on the CIP forecast, when are we going to talk about the other things on this list?
So, Commissioner, the workshop on Monday was kind of the intention to talk through those projects, but we do have meetings with each of you next week to talk through the elements of what we think will be in the manager's recommended budget, and one of those components is the CIP, and so this will actually be one of the documents included in the packet you receive, and so that would be your opportunity to give us that feedback if there's something that you want to see changed or modified.
There's a number of things on here I'd like to potentially adjust differently, so I guess I don't know when to have those conversations and who to have them with, or I don't
We're a
know.
little ahead of schedule, so we wanted to give us some of that feedback now.
I wouldn't mind
It's a
just,
good time.
someone please explain to me why on line 10 there's $4 million on 3 of those years, but not on 2 of those years. What's going on there?
David Spears, that is Road and Bridges. Would you like to talk about your bridge replacement plan, please?
Right. David Spears, Public Works. For one thing, we're just trying to show that we don't just throw $4 million a year in there just to be throwing it in. But we are also not doing as many bridges now as we were before. We're cut back to 10 per year instead of 12. We were doing 12 a year, and now we're cutting back to 10 a year going forward. And so this is what fits in with the new plan. Now,
So
there's plenty of projects out there to do, and we can fill it in, but that was above and beyond what our strategic plan is.
So I'm going to assume the answer is probably yes, but so you have these dollars earmarked to certain projects. That's why they're on the years that they are shown
yes.
here.
Yes, every project is earmarked in there.
And Commissioner, if it helps, on Monday they passed this sheet out. And so each of those projects is listed here, and if it's bond funded, they've got that listed. So we can get you another copy of this, but this is where those dollars would be
So
allocated
just to
in
make,
those years.
so these are all 20-year bonds also? Is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
that's how
So
we would
is
have
it-
planned it for now.
So I got an estimate the other day from someone that said it was about $400,000 in interest per $1 million borrowed for 20-year bonds. Does that apply to this as well?
It would be about $470,000 per
Okay.
million, and that is assuming a 4% interest rate, which we're not quite there yet, but we're planning on those bond issuances later in the years, and so that's why we've got that higher interest rate included.
Okay. $470,000 per million borrowed. So this is a $4 million borrowed. So I can just do the simple math and find how much interest that's going to be worth, right?
Yes, that's over 20 years.
Okay.
20?
Yes, sir.
But we're also paying off a bond, I assume, at about the same time.
We'll have that.
But we're just going to
break
basically
where
renew
we-
that bond. So
Yes.
it's just like continuous car payments type of deals.
Right.
Oh, I
And
mean.
so when we do the forecasting, we get that sales tax money. Each year we do put about $1.6 million of that toward road and bridge debt service. And so we would plan to use that money over time to pay for this debt service.
Okay. The items down at the bottom, in category 3, I know those are out years, but I would like to adjust some of that because I think it creates expectation. If you don't adjust it early when it first shows up, I think that down the road you have a harder explanation as to why you change things later on. So I'm not sure I agree with the order of these things and the years that they're done here. So I don't know when I need to make recommendations or.
If you want to talk about it now, that's fine while we've got everyone here.
Okay.
But we'll be sitting down with you. We have a dedicated hour next week. We're going to sit down and go through line by line.
Okay. Well, I think that's probably all my questions at the moment, knowing that we're going to sit down next week. But I guess from that meeting, are you going to circle back around to other commissioners and let us know what other things are? I don't know how you do this without having an open meeting. So I don't know how you get those comments into some type of a new proposal. I don't know how you do that.
You want me to talk about that?
Yeah.
So, Commissioner, after we get feedback from commissioners next week and there's a consensus, what ultimately will happen is that will be the decision list that goes in the recommended budget. And so we would circle back and brief you on what that final manager's recommended budget looks like.
So any of those ideas that want to be floated as potential changes, you'll ask me, I guess, at some point, do you want to change this or not change this? And I'll know whether that's an option that's being discussed or someone has an idea on changing.
We'll go through all the revenue additions to the budget. We'll go through all the changes, any reductions, as well as the CIP.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I think that's my questions for the moment. Appreciate that.
Very good. You got direction you need now for preparing the CIP and for us to talk about it next week?
I do. Adult detention facility and an admin building.
No.
Thought you were asleep.
Almost got it past you.
All right, we're
Hey,
good.
remember, former armor. We get more done before 9 a.m. than most people do all day. So you got to get up pretty stinking early to get one.
I was hoping that because of that you were asleep in the afternoon. All right, next item.
All right. David.
Here, take one pass. Good afternoon. Here to talk about the North Junction. The city's made a request of us, and I want to mention Gary Jansen, city engineer, is here with us today. First, I'll say it is nice to have a project, but that both the city and the county are interested in. So it's good to partner. And they've had a meeting with KDOT, and they've come back with a recommendation. I sent everybody the email that came last week, all of you and the manager. Basically, KDOT's recommending that we go out and make an application for a BUILD, B-U-I-L-D, transportation grant. And I will admit that at first I was a little bit on the skeptical side. This sort of has taken the place of the Tiger grants, and we've never been successful with those. But we did some investigation today, and I guess I'll go into that later. And I've warmed up on this a little bit more now. But basically, like to enter into an agreement for up to $70,000 with PEC to write track maps, right-of-way maps, and descriptions, so that then we can go out and get the right-of-way, part of the right-of-way for the project. And the city's requesting $500,000 from the county, and they'll put up $500,000, and then of course a split on the $70,000. So this will show activity on the project, which is very important when you apply for a grant, to show that it's moving along. And it's also important to show local participation. So their city council is going to consider this next Tuesday. I think there's a deadline for the grant, July 19th. I'm just going through the bullet points here. Looked in the Federal Register, and definitely Mr. Weber found this today, that it is eligible for a build. These interchanges like this are eligible, so we do know that for a fact. Then of more interest, if you look at Bill versus Tiger fact sheet from the U.S. Department of Transportation, first I'll just read the highlights here. Build transportation grants are for investments in surface transportation infrastructure and are to be awarded on a competitive basis for projects that will have significant local or regional impact. We qualify for that with the North Junction. Even better, Department of Transportation plans to award a greater share of build transportation funding to projects located in rural areas. We qualify for that. Then when you go down to the criteria, and I won't go through all of that, one of the main things on the criteria is partnership. We qualify for that. And then non-federal revenue for transportation infrastructure. If we put money into this, we qualify for that. So I think we got a shot at getting this. Now for sure, if we don't apply, we won't get anything. So where I was at first a little skeptical, I'm thinking now it might be worth the try. But Gary Jansen's here to answer questions, and Mr. Weber's here. He's looked into this also. So we don't need a decision today, but this is coming pretty quick, so you won't have a whole lot of time to think about it.
Well, I heard it's $500,000. Exactly what is from each, from city and county? What exactly do we do with that $1 million?
Going to buy right-of-way that's needed for the project, and it's said there's...
Will $1 million buy it? I thought...
No. You'll see on your sheet as 10 to 12 million, but it shows that we're working on it, and that's important to try to get it to shovel ready, and that's an important thing rather than just throwing in a grant and you haven't put any money into it. It helps with getting selected.
Where are we going to get the other $9 to $11 million then?
Well, forget the grant, then we'll talk about that.
And if we don't, then what happens with that $1 million?
Well, that interchange is going to get built sooner or later. It's not very safe. It's probably the highest priority thing, as you know this.
I agree.
Here, so you're going to buy the right of way.
The interchange. I think that we need to do it. I'm trying to figure out.
But you're not going to waste the money if you buy the right of way. You're going to need it anyway to build it. It's not a waste of money.
So we'll have $1 million worth of right of way sitting out there, possibly.
Sure. Just like on the northwest bypass, we have $17 million sitting there right now.
Is the city going to help us there?
It's already been purchased.
No, is the city going to help us there?
We'll continue to work on that. That's another subject.
No, it's a kind of an important subject to me, and I think to Commissioner Ranza. So far, the city is putting in $0 to the northwest bypass. We're putting in $350,000 a year and have been doing it for a number of years. So I would certainly love that if we partner, and I think we ought to be partners on some things, I would love for them to be partners.
Well, I certainly won't argue.
Okay, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, David, my question would be the procedure of this. Is this something that you and Gary are working on together, or has Bob Layton and Mike Scholes been working on this? Because generally with a lot of things, we partner with the city, the mayor, and the city council will reach out to us and not go through staff.
Well, I think I'll let Gary speak to the city about that if you want to, Gary.
I'll ask Gary.
This is the first week. This is the first I was briefed on it yesterday by Bob.
Good afternoon, Gary Jansen, city engineer. What's driving this is timing more than anything, and I would agree with you. I think we would expect normally for that to be the protocol, as much as anything, working with KDOT and becoming aware of the deadline for the build grant was what drove this timing-wise. With that grant being due on July 19th, we started scrambling, talking to KDOT about what our options might be here, what the status of the project currently was, what our chances might be. We started to believe that this was a good thing to submit this build grant. It started me working this through City Manager Layton, and he said, hey, let's get some information over to Sedgwick County Public Works, and then it rolled up to you pretty quick. So that was done, nothing more than a timing issue based on the July 19th and trying to get this moving forward. I know the city manager has talked to the city council about this basic terms, and it's my understanding they're in support of it, but it's just the way it happened to work, especially with the timing, because we were really under the gun at this point. And that was never intended to put you or our city council in a bad spot. It's just an opportunity that we think we shouldn't pass up.
May I? Sure. Yeah. But thank you, Gary. Yeah, and I think that makes total sense. But it just seems like the cart was maybe before the horse a little bit, because generally we get a sense that the city council is absolutely supportive of it if Bob Layton goes to Mike Scholes, and that works. The converse is true, that you kind of know where the electeds are that we're wanting to move on this. And generally, if it's initiated by staff, I think it leads a lot of questions to think, okay, is there complete buy-in at the city for this? And I guess the managers finally talked, you just said yesterday. So that would just be my concern, is just we don't want to come out supporting it if we don't know if the city is or not. And generally that's what we get from the manager. And so you have that same interpretation that Gary does, that the city council is supportive of it. So we need to, if we're going to do it, we need to let them know soon.
I have it based off, Bob told me that yesterday. He said he's gone and talked to the city council and that they are supportive of it.
Okay, yeah, that was just where my confusion came from, because generally, particularly the city council members from my area, Clendenin and Bluebaugh, and the same with Longwell, they'll come and tell me, hey, we have something we need you to work on, and I haven't heard anything from them about this particular issue.
I don't disagree, and it was more logistics than anything on this. If it helps you out any, this all materialized literally in the last week or two. So
hey, I love it that
so we haven't been strategizing on the other side for very long. It's all come together really fast.
Oh yeah, no, I appreciate government doesn't normally move fast, so I appreciate that. I'm just trying to grasp to make sure if we're going to make a public decision on this, that we know exactly where the city council is going to have the support as well.
That.
So thank you, Gary. I apprect it.
We'll see next week. Bob did tell me they're going to at least vote on the application piece of it at next week's council meeting.
All right.
So you should know at least by Tuesday what support you have with the council.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good. Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Chairman. So I see on the first paragraph, it talks about a $105 million project. Is that, how much of this North Junction is the $105 million going to cover? Is that just going to cover the Broadway and 235 Exchange, or is it going to cover the next phase after that?
I'm happy to answer that if you don't mind. The what's KDOT has under design right now is combined two phases, what they've called the gold and orange phase, and it's effectively what's been done at Kellogg and 235, and it builds the two ramps for northbound to westbound and southbound to eastbound, which will take care of effectively what we think is 80 to 90% of the problems, probably more. Just like the same type of thing that was done again at Kellogg and 235, which for most of the traveling public is going to feel like that project's done. Right. These two major movements are going to take care of nearly all the problems with the $105 million.
So this 105 takes care of basically 90% of the major problems there.
Correct.
And I don't know if we'll ever see the other phases down the road. I mean, we know there's 3 more phases for Kellogg 235. I don't know if it'll ever happen. They might. Maybe they won't. We don't know. But 90% of the problems there are also taken care of.
I would agree.
That project was about the same figure as this. It was $110 million, $113 million, I think, planned. It ended up being $103, I think. That's where we're at right now, I believe. Our share of that was 11.3. We did a 10% match. Did that include right-of-way purchase?
for that project out west, KDOT purchased the right-of-way they needed. Most of that is back towards West Street, so where you see takes, they've been north and south of Kellogg along West Street. There's some of the places where we had condemned a right-of-way for the flood control where they needed to get permission from the county, from you, to be there, but those are relatively small takes. Our contribution, $11.6 million, is strictly on the construction piece.
So the right-of-way wasn't part of that $113 million figure. That was any right-of-way, it was a separate issue.
Right.
So do I understand this $105 million, that's separate from the $10 to $12 million for right-of-way in this case? So we need like $117 million perhaps for this project, probably. Something around that.
Well, again, somebody does. It's going to have to be a partnership of some kind.
Right.
And so the build grant, for example, if you're able to get it, it's up to $25 million. That doesn't do the whole thing.
Right.
So it's going to take some state money or potentially building stacking with another federal grant, maybe an infra grant or something. But this is where you get started. And then all of that requires a local match, which could be, in this case, could be state funding as the local match. But I think the point of this project, and I do want to clarify what Dave said, there are really three elements to this thing. The $70,000 is for to hire a consultant to work out the detailed build grant proposal. So that's step one. That grant application needs to be on July 19th. That's kind of the big driver for time. There's a $40,000 about number. Dave was talking about the right-of-way acquisition process, getting the descriptions written, the track maps, and getting all that going. That's $40,000. That's something the city would like to have you commit to participating in, but they need to be able, in my opinion, they'd be able to say in the application that they have a deal to start working the right-of-way, to hire a consultant to go ahead and start working the right-of-way. And the third element is to get the balance of that $1 million is to put a fund together to go out and start taking down strategic pieces of right-of-way. And so some, and we've seen the maps, some are large, a couple of large complete takings. There is a long string of small takings, but they all need to be done, and so get started. And we never know what the cost of right-of-way is going to be on a project. We could start it, or they could. KDOT could take it over when this thing gets a little bit more legs under it and finish it up. It has all kinds of options. But this is to get, this grant talks about partnerships. It talks about using other than federal funds. And so I think for the grant application, this kind of answers two of those questions. It gives them an opportunity to take credit for both of those things.
So is that $40,000 figure part of the 70 or on top of the 70?
On top of the 70.
So $110,000 right up front.
For all the engineering, what you would call the engineering.
And that still leaves $1 million on the table. So it's $1 million plus 70 plus 40.
No, it's the 110 comes out of the $1 million. So $890,000 is left.
Okay, so it's $1 million minus 110.
Right.
Well, you spent 110 out of the $1 million, so at least $890,000 for purchasing right away potentially.
Yes.
You use the word taking. Do you mean eminent domain? What does that mean, taking?
It just means they need the whole property. There'd be uneconomic remnants, so it's not like you can take a little strip. You're going to be buying the whole thing.
Okay. Well, just a thought, but this is moving kind of quick, and I don't mind that. We don't want to lose out on $25 million opportunity, but I guess I would feel comfortable potentially with doing the $110,000 to get ourselves ready for trying to get the $25 million. That makes sense to me. But the balance, $890,000. Why can't we just put that into an account and set aside and say this is for right of way, but don't actually do anything with it? Because this project's $117 million. $890,000 is nothing if you don't have a plan on how you're going to get the rest of that money. So when you understand the rest of the money, you get the build grant, or you get a KDOT match, or you get federal grant, or whatever it is it's going to be. Once you understand the full finance plan, then it makes sense to spend that money. But I don't see why you'd spend any money when you don't have you're talking about less than 1%. Say 0.7% of the money to do this total project. It's just not even worth. It's almost not worth actually spending the money when you have no idea how you're going to get the other 99% of the money. So I can see spending the money trying to get the $25 million grant. That makes sense to me. And I don't even mind putting the money into a set aside and say this money is for right of way, but don't actually spend it. So I can see potentially putting the money to this, into an account. So when you make the grant application, they understand there's money set aside by local government for that purpose, but it's not been spent yet. It's just waiting there. And then so if the plan develops, then you go forward. If the plan doesn't develop, you don't do that. So, but actually spending that money to me does not make sense right now. It's less than 1% of the solution. Yes, sir. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've been working this project for some time as partners. We went to Topeka with the City of Wichita as partners. We truly believe that this is an important project. The first phase that's going to start early next year will have no impact on the construction whatsoever. It'll just set everything up to be able to work the next phases of it. We've got to get to those next phases if we're going to see any really relief in those interchanges. So I don't have a problem at all with partnering with Wichita. We've told them all along that we're partners on trying to get the North Junction fixed. And we need to move forward. I'm a little uneasy with the way that we got the information. That if we've been working partners all along, why weren't we brought into this as soon as it became apparent that additional funding was needed? It sounds like times we're told and times we're not. Times we're told is when we need money. So that concerns me a little bit. The other thing that concerns me a little bit, we're doing the 235 in Kellogg, and this county paid all of that. And it's an important project, and I think we need to be doing stuff like that, but it would have been nice to be a little partnership with the City of Wichita, since it's wholly within the City of Wichita. But my most important concern is still the Northwest Bypass, and I think Commissioner Ramsell will agree with me that that is an important project for the future. It's going to look exactly like K96 looks on the east side if we ever get it built. Every single interchange is going to be a commercial area. Everything in between those commercial areas is going to be built up with housing and so forth. And I would love to see the City of Wichita understand that that is an important thing to happen. And I'd love for them to start thinking about partnering with us on the Northwest Bypass, because they haven't been really doing anything to help us on that. So with that said, I would lean towards hearing what the City of Wichita does this coming week. And I think we need to, as we've been partners all along on this North Junction, we need to continue doing that. Commissioner Unruh?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Well, I've listened to the comments and understand what everybody's saying. I guess I'm either not smart enough or not sensitive enough. I mean, I'm fine with what happened. I'm glad you guys got alerted to this opportunity and took some steps to find out what was there and let our Public Works Director know. And it because of the time frame, it bubbled up to where we can talk about it now. But I think that North Junction is a critical piece to our transportation infrastructure, and I understand that we need to start buying right away to have a favorable favorable judgment on whether or not we get to build things. So I think we ought. I'll be surprised if Wichita doesn't support this, and we're partners with them, and I think we need to tell Lindsay to find $500,000 so that we can get in the game. We got to move forward on it. So I'm happy. Let's do it. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from any commissioners? Gary, you got anything else?
If you don't mind, I might add one last comment in response to Commissioner Howell, just to reiterate and echo something that David said. When our mayor and council members and manager and even the chamber were in Washington, D.C. several months ago and talked to USDOT representatives about the grant funding, we've been told time and time again, and also from KDOT, that we stand no chance if we're not moving forward in some direction. And we're confident that that means we need to start buying right away. That's the reason for the recommendation. $1 million is a little bit of an arbitrary number to start. We think that feels like that shows a commitment and that we want to move forward and start making offers. So I just wanted to reiterate that part. I have a firm belief from everything we've seen and heard and talked to on past grant applications we submitted, that if we are not started in earnest on buying right-of-way, then we might as well not even submit the application. So that's why this is structured the way it is.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Gary? Seeing none. David, you got anything else for us?
No, sir.
Nothing else. Lindsay, Mr. Deputy Manager, you got anything else?
That completes the agenda, sir.
All right. Well,
This was scheduled till 4, so should we hang around?
If you really want to, feel free.
I didn't know if you wanted the city engineer to come up and commit on that northwest bypass or not while he's here, but we can table that. So.
but don't I have your promise you're going to work that for me?
I will pass on that message.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it. All right, we're adjourned.